Why do you think that the folks that, who were in prominent positions in the Biden administration haven't done what you're suggesting? And basically just say a, like a complete mea culpa. I mean, is it my sense, and you know these folks a lot closer than I do, is partly they just feel like they'll basically just, no matter what they say, they'll just be basically just people will take the opportunity to beat the shit out of them. Or maybe they feel that if they admit that they were this wrong on something this catastrophic and immoral, that itself makes the case that they should never hold office again. So they're conceding that they should go into a different line of work. Like, or maybe it's sometimes I wonder, maybe it's because they feel like their former colleagues would be upset at them because if you say like because you're not only implicating yourself, you're implicating everybody else, including the people who your bosses. What's because I agree with this limited like we could have done a little more. I mean, to me, it doesn't get you anywhere. So help me understand why you think we haven't seen what you're suggesting.
I will say, as someone like, who had to go through my own process, you know, there are things in the Obama years that I regret, that I think we did wrong. And I think in my early years, I was always willing to be critical of certain things, including our relationship with Israel. Um, but it took me like a couple of years to realize that the reckoning I had to do was deeper than saying like, the war in Libya turned out to be the wrong thing, or, we shouldn't have done the Afghan surge, or I had to kind of reckon with what was wrong with American foreign policy, like deep, that essentially I was a part of operating machinery that was often inhumane, that was often, um, even if I believed I was well intentioned when I went to work, that I was participating in a supremacy that was baked in to the entire wiring of the machinery. Because to get to your question, I think there's different answers for different people. One, do not underestimate the extent to which some of those people are still in a feedback loop where they are actually told they did the right thing. Like they're not on our algorithm, right? So some people, they're going out to dinner with APAC people, or they're still friends with people at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, or I was just in Aspen at the security forum. There was no conversation about Gaza. It was, we'll just talk about Ukraine and how heroic we are in supporting the Ukrainians. So there's some people that actually can
Right.
just live in a comfortable bubble where they're still reinforced that, yeah, maybe there's that went a lot of hand, but like all in all, we're the good guys. Then there are people, there's a related piece of that there's still a perception that you're going to be punished more for breaking with Israel than you will be validated for doing it. That, in other words, to be blunt, the power structure is still such that, you know what, like even if, these leftists are winning primaries in New York, the center of gravity in this political party is still going to be one that wants to maintain this relationship with Israel. And I have more to lose by breaking than not. And I can get criticized online, and that stinks. And I'm socially uncomfortable with certain people, but actually my career benefits from not making this step, right? And then I think there's a bit of a psychology that I can never make the quote unquote left happy on this issue. So, just look what happens when I, try to admit I did something wrong. It's never enough for those people, but it pisses off these people. So if I'm going to make everybody angry, I might as well just not reckon with this. That's another piece of this psychology. But then I think to your point, and this gets to where I start with me, there's a deeper element of like it's hard to acknowledge that you were. I mean, I've had to. It's been very hard for me to reckon with the extent of killing I was involved in. Um, Even as someone who was not in the military chain of command, I was more of a communications and strategy person. But like, drones and wars that I was a part of, um, I can't imagine the scale of it being a genocide where all the weapons are provided by a process I was a part of. And I think psychologically, going there
Yeah.
might just feel like too much weight for some people. I do believe if somebody does it, it
Mhm.
kind of creates an opening for others to do it, and I've yet to see anybody do it. And to the last point, yeah, there's a lot like, oh, Joe Biden would be mad at me. Like there's human dynamics here, but I don't have a lot of patience for it, Peter, because as you pointed out to me once when I said to you, like, I did one of these and I got a lot of grief from people, and I was like, oh, this sucks. Because it was like when I was kind of going through my own, here's how decisions got made. And you said, well, imagine how do you think how gaslit do you think the Palestinians are? I mean, that I've kept that in my mind ever since. It's like, I'm sorry, these people, it's uncomfortable for them to face up to the genocide they're a part of, but like, I'm actually not sorry relative to the harm that was done and could be done in the future. So I think people's feet do need to be held to the fire.
Yeah. I also think maybe there's something about getting out of Washington, D.C. I mean, I
Yeah,
noticed that, you've been living in L.A. I don't think it's coincidental. I mean, I'm not a fan of every aspect of Tucker Carlson's new political identity, but I do wonder sometimes the fact that he went out to live in middle of nowhere in Maine and got very far away from Washington also was part of the reason that he was
100%.
able to, I just, again, from when I think back when I was in Washington, I just feel like there's a set of assumptions that are, that are very thick there that when you get further away look a little bit different. Um, Youssef, I'm curious about who would be the kind of people that you would want to see going into a Democratic administration? I mean, it seems to me like it's always challenging for people who are genuinely progressive, generally on the left, to figure out how they're going to go into the belly of the beast and run an empire, right? I mean, like, but I'm just curious, like, who do you think would be the kind of foreign policy people who you would trust to basically have a human rights oriented vision of American foreign policy towards Palestine and Israel?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think trust is something that has to be earned over time. And I don't think given everything that we've seen as Palestinians, the history of American policy, that it's going to be easy to trust anybody. And as we talked about, there is a machine here. There is a set of bigger political interests, and I think oftentimes there are folks who might seem like their head and their heart is in the right place, but ultimately, are part of this bigger process that ends up keeping things the way that they have been. Um, I will say though that I think it's going to be very hard to see how anybody running in 2028 who does not explicitly say that folks that were key architects of the Biden administration's policy towards Israel and Palestine will not be part of their administration. It's hard to take anybody seriously running in 2028 who's not willing to do that. And I think what's so infuriating about the soft apology tour that we're seeing now with the New Yorker piece and so on is that if you were paying attention, this was not oh, we made a mistake here. No, this was a very calculated and deliberate policy to ensure that Israel had the maximum amount of space that it could to do as it pleased in Gaza. That was the role of the Biden administration in providing the weaponry, in providing the political cover, in providing the political communications to excuse time and again one set of Israeli policies after the other that amounted to war crimes. That was the function of the Biden administration. That wasn't a combination of mistakes. That was a very deliberate goal. And
Vetoing Security Council resolutions.
vetoing Security Council resolutions, vetoing their own processes, their own
Yeah.
internal processes that found that what Israel was doing was deliberately denying aid, vetoing those processes so they wouldn't have to actually hold Israel accountable. I mean, from the very beginning of the process, the function of the White House was precisely to give Israel as much time and space as possible to do what it wanted to do in Gaza. To me, that's entirely unforgivable. And nobody involved in that in any way um, can be trusted in any capacity again.